Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name's Patrick Nelson. I'm the Managing Director of Reach Markets, and we're hosting on behalf of Prescient Therapeutics Limited an investor and shareholder briefing today, and we're joined by the Managing Director and CEO, Stephen Utomi Clark. Today's session will run for roughly 20-25 minutes. Stephen will be giving you an overview, an update on recent activity on the business, an explanation of what Prescient do and how they do it, and some of the very exciting upcoming developments that are being rolled out at the moment. No doubt many of you will have seen some of these announcements through the ASX. So, Stephen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And just before we get going, I'll just go through a couple of housekeeping issues and hand over to Stephen. So any advice contained in today's presentation is general only, doesn't take into consideration your personal circumstances. You need to decide for yourself whether it's appropriate for you. And I'll bring up the disclaimer for PTX just while I run through a couple of other things. So today's session is very much about inviting investors and shareholders to hear directly from Stephen, and also contribute by asking questions. If there's something that you would like to know, please put that question into the chat box. We don't mind, provided it's a question that is that we're allowed to answer. Then we'll answer every question that comes up, and I'll certainly call out every question that is asked. So please use it that way. And if your chat box isn't open, top right-hand corner of the screen there is a red arrow. Simply click on that red arrow. It will launch the chat box. You type it in. Not everyone in the audience can see the question that you're asking. Only I can as the moderator. So I'm not going to call your full name out. I'll just simply address it by your first name and then call the question out. If there's numerous questions and they're the same question, I'll try and put those questions together. If you feel that we don't ask the question in the way that you want it, just type it in again and we'll ask it. All right, so there's a very good turnout today. Very happy to see everyone online. Stephen, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for taking the time in your mornings to dial in. I'm not going to assume too much prior knowledge, and I understand there might be a blended audience with respect to their scientific background, so bear with me. But who are we? Prescient Therapeutics, we're an ASX listed oncology company, so we develop new therapies for cancer. Our ASX code is PTX, and I'm going to tell you more about the field that we're working in, which is personalised medicine. So I think the days are disappearing very quickly when one size fits all and everyone's given an indiscriminate drug, and I'm going to tell you about the exciting developments in personalised medicine and where we fit in that landscape. But firstly, it's important to look at what causes cancer. So the way the body works, cells divide over and over again. Invariably, mistakes are made. What your body is basically doing is taking the information from a book or a whole library and transcribing it, and then taking that copy and copying that, and on and on and on. And invariably, mistakes are made, and some of those mutations eventually cause cancer. Now, how do we fit within this landscape? Well, we have some of these mutations are switches that drive the cancer and make it very aggressive, and we turn those mutations off and thereby kill cancer. So why personalised medicine at all? So I think this diagram depicts the way the landscape has been for decades, and that is someone will get diagnosed with cancer, they'll go on to an untargeted drug, an indiscriminate drug, and you can see at the top there's some patients, if they're lucky, they might benefit, and other groups, they won't benefit. But worse still is when a patient doesn't benefit, but they get exposed to all of the adverse events, all of the side effects. So they're getting all of the toxicities, but none of the benefits. And an analogy here is if you needed to remove weeds from your lawn, one way of doing it is to carpet bomb your entire lawn with weed killer. And yes, that's going to destroy your weeds, but guess what? It's going to destroy the rest of your lawn with it. And what we're about is spot killing those weeds. So have a look at this picture, and thanks to genomics, this picture now looks like this. So we're able to look at what are the drivers of different diseases and realise that people aren't all the same, and neither are their cancers. and you're able to stratify those, group them into various groups of people, various groups of cancers, and give them a corresponding medicine that they're going to respond to. Now, these are called targeted therapies. This is the first movement in personalised medicine, and this is exactly what our current two drugs, PTX 100 and 200, are about, is picking these different populations and giving them the medicine they need. Now, this is great for patients, but think about it from a company's point of view. You're stacking the deck. So instead of having a 7 to 10% chance of response with an indiscriminate therapy, you're now putting people on a study who you think are a better chance of responding to the therapy. Why? Because they have the mutation that is driving the cancer that your drug is seeking to address. So it's been another busy year for Prescient, and this was taken from our recent AGM presentation. It gives me enormous pleasure when I dust off the copy of the AGM from the year prior and saying, here are the things we want to achieve. And guess what? We've once again achieved everything we said we we're going to do, or on track to do so, and a whole lot more. So we started the year with a very meaningful capital raising, which gives us the oxygen we need to do what we need to do. So we're not a company living from hand to mouth, which is fantastic. We've demonstrated progress in all of our clinical studies and had some really interesting data, because it's all about data from our studies. We've collaborated with groups on new formulations and done the manufacturing we need to do, and kick-started a really exciting PTX 100 trial. And once again, these were the things we said we were going to do last year. The only things I would add to this is that we're aware that all three of our PTX 200 trials, AML, breast cancer and ovarian cancer, are due for updates in this quarter, and I'm well and truly aware that we're in the middle of this quarter, and I think we're on track for announcing all of these. So yeah, very excited. And inevitably in drug development, or in any company really, and drug development's no different, we encounter some challenges. I think one of the ones that we're facing that is sort of beyond our control is an unfavourable exchange rate. As many of you might know, PTX conducts all its studies until the PTX 100 study, all done in the US, where we've got basically best-of-breed clinicians. Now for me, sort of the break-even rate is, to justify those trials in the US is maybe 70 to 72 US cents, and we've been below that for a while, and I think the market outlook is it could be a bigger headwind than that going forward. So we've got to look at strategies to bring those to Australia, or apply for some grants to get those funded sort of off balance sheet and have some relief. We've also looked at various combinations with PTX 200, because they're all combination studies. Invariably you get drug-to-drug interactions, so we've had protocol amendments that are looking to basically harness all of the efficacy from the drug whilst minimising any undesirable side effects. And what we're really, really proud of is the challenge of getting PTX 100 back into the clinic in an unprecedented basket study, which is very, very unique. We're the only company in Australia doing this, which is an efficient and potentially shortcut route to drug development. This was we had manufacturing challenges there. Manufacturing doesn't typically get sexy headlines, but it's indispensable from clinical trials, and we've done a great job synthesising a very tricky drug and getting the drug we need and initiating that trial in Australia under the leadership of Miles Prince, who's a genuine key opinion leader. And also last Monday we announced a collaboration with Korrina Biotech, and Korrina Biotech is a private company in South Australia developing Carty therapies. I'm going to go into that in a minute about what that is. It's our first foray into this area and fits under our general banner of personalised medicine. But what we're seeking to do, they develop cell therapies, they grow cells, they're good at that and making the actual CAR-T cells, and we believe there's really good synergy with our knowledge of targeted therapies, I wish I could talk to you more about this right now, but the terms of the deal are, the arrangement are confidential. And why are they confidential? It's because we want to generate new intellectual property, and if you announce it, the specifics publicly, then you jeopardize, due to prior art, your ability to actually patent. But believe us when we say that both parties are very excited about this joint project. We're going to be sharing any new IP with them. So what is Carty? So you can see there a normal T cell and a Carty cell. So Carty T cells are basically white blood cells that are in your body to fight infection. It could be bacterial infection or viral infection. They can and do detect cancers. And you may never ever know about those. You could have T cells picking up cancers right now and they disappear. Unfortunately, people who get diagnosed with cancer where their cancers have progressed, their T cells are no longer recognizing those cancers. And Carty is about making those cells responsive to cancer and waking them up to the cancer and harnessing all the disease fighting, the cell killing capabilities of our own endogenous T cells. So here's how it works. So a cancer patient will go to a clinic and have blood collected, their own blood. This blood is separated, and the T cells are isolated from there. And this is where the magic happens. Outside of the body, they engineer these T cells to have receptors that recognize the cancer. So basically, your T cells that were previously very docile sniffer dogs, not doing incredibly much, a little bit of a lap dog, what you're doing here is training them outside of the body to be attack dogs. So really good sniffer dogs that can sniff out the cancer, and when they find it, they will kill it. And so they're expanded, so they're engineered and they're expanded up. Millions of these cells are grown, and then they are re-injected back into the patient. So the patient is getting an enhanced version of their very own cells. You can see how this is, in many ways, the most bespoke personalized medicine. It's their own blood cells. And yes, so this is that's the overall process, and this goes into a little bit more detail about what this is. So basically, using your own T cells, engineering them to recognize and attack cancer. And the reason this had some stunning headlines a couple of years ago is because this approach in certain type of blood cancers called B-cell cancers, Carty therapy had stunning responses, 90% cure rates in these patients, well, response rates. Since then, there's been a little bit of a stumbling block in the field, but how do we translate the success from here, which we know is revolutionary, into other types of blood cancers and into solid tumours? And without giving too much away, this is what Prescient is going to start to address, and we believe we've got some very interesting technologies that can help address this stumbling block. Everyone's sort of bursting at the gates wanting to use this exciting application in other cancers. This is what we are going to be addressing. It's a huge opportunity, and what we believe is a real paradigm shift in the way cancer is treated. And you can see here, this is this fits within our remit of personalized therapies. What we're really doing, we're starting with targeted therapies, this personalized medicine approach that I spoke about earlier about finding the right patient populations. On the other side, we've got Carty. Our collaboration fits right in the middle. So what we're doing here is using targeted therapies as a launch pad into some very new, exciting areas of personalized medicine like Carty. And it's one thing to sort of blow your own trumpet and think that we're working in very interesting fields, because of course everyone's going to be saying that. It's another when you see business development conferences specifically for cancer therapies, and the highlights from this was just taken in September from a big European conference. The two big takeouts were targeted therapies, that the activity in this area has been exceptional and will stay hot. It's got no signs of abating. And the other big theme there is that drugging the undruggable, in particular KRAS. and they expect a surge in business development in this area. Well, guess what areas we're working in? Targeted therapies, and PTX 100 is in drugging the undruggable. Carty is probably another step beyond this that wasn't addressed necessarily in this conference, but right here, right now, these are the very, very hot areas. So we're working in exciting fields right now, and we believe with our extension to cell therapies, we're future-proofing ourselves as well. And yeah, the landscape continues to move in our favour. These are some examples of other targeted therapy companies. Tesaro bought out just under a year ago, just over a year ago. And then Loxo, which many observers in the US had flatteringly compared us to, who pioneered this targeted therapy basket trial approach where you didn't care where the tissue, where the cancer resided in the body. If it was driven by a particular mutation, then their drug's applicable. They helped pioneer that, and they were bought out in January, and the company that gave birth to Loxo, called Array, bought out just in June. It's worth knowing that two of the people working for Prescient were instrumental at Array and developing the Array portfolio and the Loxo drug. And it was them that actually really steered us in the direction of doing this very clever, innovative basket trial before it made the headlines. So we're very blessed to have the people who helped grow these companies now very influential in helping grow Prescient. And RAS is dominating the headlines. If you follow the industry at all, barely a day or certainly week goes by without it in the headlines again. So RAS was considered undruggable just a few months ago, until Amgen was the first crack in the armour of RAS. And people thought it was undruggable because it's actually physically a very smooth molecule that resides inside the cell. It's very difficult to target, and if you do get inside the cell, very difficult for anything to bind to. And we have a very, very different approach which we think mitigates this. And you can see the two big companies there, Amgen, which is a huge $121 billion company, and Mirati following close on its heels. They're working in very specific areas within RAS, so a small area within a small area, if you like, and we believe we cast a wider net due to our mechanism of action. So I think we can help work with these molecules but also capture what they cannot. So that was a fair bit of ground, but if I want to leave you with anything at all, it's that it's been another year of solid progress. I'm really proud of our team, and we've been busy working away in the background on some things that really add long-term value to the company. We've got 3 studies we'll be updating you on very shortly with 200. A 100 trial with RAS is underway in a very, very hot space and due to read out in a year, and that has got a lot of industry attention. And we believe both of our drugs have advantages over other approaches where they're very differentiated, which is exactly what you want to see. You don't want to see a Me Too drug. So these are very, very differentiated. And excitingly, this is a thin edge of the wedge for us because we're extending from targeted therapies and extending beyond that into Carty applications. So, and we've got that funding in place. So we think it's a really, really exciting time to be looking at Prescient. And thank you very much for your attention, and happy to turn to some questions.
All right. Okay, so there's been a couple of questions that have come through. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. If anyone's got a question, please type it into the chat box now. There was a question from Jennifer on the Carty. So she was asking, and what sort of time frame to be able to see these drugs being actually used in patients?
Yeah, good question. Carty, we're after traditional drug development can be very, very long, 10, 15 years. We've got approaches that we believe truncate that dramatically. So by the time these touch patients, we've got technologies that we think can be clear preclinical studies in 2 to 3 years and then be in the clinic. So you're looking at sort of touching a patient within that at the end of that time frame, which is pretty quick going by drug development standards.
And what sort of treatments would that replace?
Well, we think they're going to start where no treatments currently exist, where treatments are currently exhausted. So basically they won't have any competition initially.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be looking at sort of last line therapy when patients are run out of options, if you like, and these will be used there. And as more data is gathered, invariably regulators let you use it earlier and earlier and earlier, and by virtue increase the number of patients you can address and the market size you can treat.
Okay. Brett's asked, will you need funds in the short term?
Yeah, good question. No, and if I'm proud of many things since I've been in charge of Prescient, but one particular one is I think we've been one of the few biotech companies on the ASX that's been ahead of schedule or on schedule and under budget for my entire tenure. And we do not need short-term funding. That includes some of these projects. If something left of field comes on our plate and that needs separate funding, then I guess we can look at that. That's the big disclaimer. But no, we do not need any short-term funding. We raised $9 million at the beginning of the year. With our rebate, we're still well over that. So we're good custodians, I think, of shareholder funds.
Abhishek has asked, has made a comment about expected outcomes from trials being binary. Okay. The question in there is, would there be any chance to repurpose and tweak the formula for next attempt?
That's a very, very good question. I do not like studies that are binary, where you put all your chips on the table and you can double it or triple it or 10-bag it or end up with zero. So the way our trials are designed is that, and invariably questions come up. Let's not forget the nature of research and development is to try to answer questions that have not been answered before. Invariably, things from left of field will pop up, things we've not considered, good and bad. The way we've designed our trials, if that occurs, is that what data can we squeeze out of it? So they will not be binary events unless there's some sort of catastrophic failure and the drug happens to kill every person it touches. That's probably the exception, and I think we'd be very unlucky to see that. But no, I think there'll always be information we can squeeze out of it. It might be we need to look at a different dose, we need to look at a different schedule, we need to look at a different combination. The outcome will always be trying to be more enlightened and value add on the back of that. But very good question.
Thank you. John has asked, why is Prescient any different from other biotechs?
Every biotech claims it's different. I think what makes us different is that in Australia, I think we see too many single product and single trial companies. And to be honest, that is, that's a high risk game you're playing, putting all your eggs into a high risk basket. And going to the previous question, if that doesn't read out, then you're in big trouble. We keep ratcheting up the safety net beneath the company and giving ourselves multiple sort of jump points by diversifying the portfolio. So we've got 4 trials at the moment. We've got this collaboration. There's other things that we're looking at. Each of them sort of diversify risk. I don't think many companies on the ASX have that. And certainly we've not got, there is not another listed company on the ASX as exposed to personalised medicine as we are. There's no other RAS targeting molecule in a really, really hot space on the ASX. There is not another Carty company on the ASX. Basically, if you want exposure to these really hot areas, it's us or no one, really.
Very good. Is there any other questions that you've got while you have Stephen here? I might ask, you mentioned Carty was developed a couple of years ago. Is that actually being used now beyond trials? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is approved. There are 2, one approved by Novartis, one by Celgene, now owned by Bristol Myers Squibb. And they are they're almost identical to one another. And therefore a certain type of B-cell cancers, blood cancers. They've not really extended beyond that. They are, I guess you'd call it, first generation CAR-Ts, but they are actually being sold. They're being, the treatments are very, very expensive because it's bespoke, $300,000 to $500,000 per patient. And what these big companies are doing now is justifying that by saying, but the responses are so good, and if the patients don't respond, then maybe we don't charge you the full amount. I think the next generation of CAR-Ts coming through that we're interested in is looking at accessing broader populations of patients and making those costs, come down, costs of goods.
And is that an option, I mean, for you guys to go down that sort of path where you have the more expensive options available in a shorter period of time and then move to something that is...
Yeah, I think so. That's the lowest hanging fruit is to use your technologies to pursue other targets using the first generation things and then moving towards, your newer cars. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure you're not allowed to give a time frame to that, but is there anything you can say more broadly around cash flow? It's a common question. When will this business move to? And would that be an example of what an early stage cash flow would be?
That is. I think there's two answers to that question. One is that these can. You don't need huge sales teams you don't need to necessarily pimp yourself out to big pharma to get these to patients. Why? Because you go to places like Peter Mac, which are cell therapy centres, and there's various centres around Asia and the US where the patients go to the centre. Why? Because it's about infrastructure and do they have the ability to actually make these cells? So if you target 20 patients a year and you're charging them even $200,000, that's a nice little business. You can be outsourcing all of the manufacturing to the cell therapy manufacturing facility there, and you don't necessarily need to pimp that out. So that's the first answer to the question. The second one is that even at the preclinical stage, if we're able to crack some of these challenges that other people are facing, then you can monetize things a lot earlier by collaboration, licenses, joint ventures, etc. Lighting as many fires as you can, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Scott's asked, what are your confidence levels for all three PTX 200 study results this quarter?
How do I measure that, Scott? In a percent? I don't know how to answer that, but yeah, let's just see.
All right. Ben has asked a question equally I'm not sure that you can answer, but I'll pose it to you and we'll say what we can. Obviously, Stephen's restricted on what he can say regarding share prices.
Actually, sorry, I've just read Scott's email properly. It says confidence level for the results being this quarter, not what the results will be. Scott, highly confident that we'll get those this quarter. So apologies for misreading your question.
All right, so Ben's asked the question regarding what are your thoughts on market cap over previous weeks as compared to today, close to what you expect before trials with current market cap of 32 mil.
Well, again, I think you can compare us to single product, single trial companies or single project companies that have still got 2 or 3 times our market cap. I think we've got a long way to go before you'd say we're fully priced. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, PTX, if you're not currently a shareholder, you can go to ptxtherapeutics.com, go to the Investor Centre. It's got all the information regarding the company. By all means, register to receive updates as they're coming out, and they'll be delivered to you. We think it's a great opportunity. There is a lot going on with PTX. It's a very well-run business. So if you also go onto put it in your watch screen and follow it, or if you want to speak to one of our advisors, you can call the office here. And if you've got a question, it's in a technical nature, Stephen's great and has always come back to any questions that have come in from shareholders or potential shareholders. So you can communicate to the company via their Investor Centre. David, is there an open dialogue between pharma and partnering license options?
The short answer is yes. The partnering process takes necessarily a very long time. A lot of people wait till the end of phase 2 results. I'm of a different school. I think engage early, engage often, so that, and there would literally be a couple of dozen companies with folders on us so that they get comfortable and they get comfortable with our mechanism of action, our people. You build rapport, you build trust, and they follow your data so that by the time they're ready to transact, they're up to speed. But yeah, that's a process that we've been undertaking for a couple of years now to get some of these parties up to speed.
Thanks, Stephen. Are there any other final questions? Otherwise, I'll give one moment if anyone wants to drop anything into the chat. Otherwise, thank you very much. Some great questions there. We appreciate everyone taking the time to come along. Stephen, I'll leave the last word with yourself.
No, thank you very much. I just want to thank everyone for their time. I think it's a really exciting time to be looking at us. Looks like there's a fair few eyes on the stock now, and it's a good time for those eyes to be on us, given the catalysts that we've got coming up. And we're well funded. We're not asking for money right now, and we've got a bunch of exciting things I can't wait to inform you about in the not too distant future. So many thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.